Good afternoon, everybody. Gary Allen with you here at 4 p.m. on Fridays with Mainstreet. I hope you tell your friends and family members about it. 4 p.m. every Friday afternoon, Mainstreet. We've got some great guests coming up. Next week, Bruce Valange is joining us. But today, I've got one of my dear friends and a gentleman who is a legend in the comedy business. He owns the Punchline in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also Billy Gardell's manager. And he's managed many, many celebrities like Steve Harvey, Jeff Foxworthy, and many, many others. And we're going to talk about the comedy business. We're going to talk about people that are in it, what he sees coming. Oh, down to the felt. Hello there, Tommy. Anyway, that's what this show's all about. You get in there. And by the way, go on over to twitch.tv/drinks, jokes, and capital N storytelling. And you'll be able to ask questions, listen to us the same as you are doing now, but you'll be able to ask questions of my guest, Chris DiPetta. And so, and by the way, while you're at it, check out all the other shows on this channel. There's some fantastic shows Monday through Friday, as well as Sunday with my good friend, Mark Riccadonna, who will be on with us in just a couple of minutes. So without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit more about this man. In 1982, he started the Punchline in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a manager. He's a producer. He's a director. You name it, he's done it in this business. He's seen some of the biggest comics come and go through his front doors, as well as in Los Angeles and other. He's a consultant. He's consulted and helped open a number of comedy clubs like Catch a Rising Star in New York over the years. He has become a friend of mine over the last couple of years, and he likes me. We got to figure out why. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome one of the great geniuses of this business and a great comedy mind himself, Mr. Chris DiPetta.
I thought somebody else was coming on.
you and Ray Abruzzo do this to me all the time.
Who's coming up? Yeah.
You and Abruzzo do it to me every time you come on. When I give a real auspicious announcement, Abruzzo goes, Gary who? Gary who? Yeah. Oh, anyway, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, it's wonderful. And you're coming from your Palaces Palace, and I won't tell people where. So
beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, actually.
Atlanta's really, really nice. My dad had a chance
to actually warm today. It's like 80 for a change. It's really nice today.
Yeah, it's 80 something here in Central Florida too. And it's supposed to start raining here before too long. Chris, how has been this COVID lockdown sort of thing done for you in the Punchline? Did you completely close the doors for a while?
Well, we had to initially, right after, I believe it was, March 15th. We had to shut down. I mean, we couldn't open. They closed everything in Atlanta. I mean, all the restaurants, bars, everything else, any entertainment venue was gone. Yeah. So we were closed. And then in August, they said, we'll give you, you can open up, but with 30% capacity, as long as people stay 6 feet from one another. And truly, we opened because we still want to pay our employees, but it's break even at best. I mean, we can't make any money at all. And
right.
A lot of my partners are in the same kind of situations in clubs. I'm affiliated with a few guys in the Southeast that have clubs, and we talk all the time. And every state was different. That's the funny part. Alabama was different, Tennessee was different, North Carolina was different. So some were closed, some were open, and we all suffered. I mean, every one of us suffered. And, we're all trying to make our way back. We were fortunate enough that we've been established enough that we were able to hold on, but there were some clubs that didn't make it at all. I mean, they're gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a disaster for a lot of industries, in particular the show business industry. And before we get into a lot of different things about your background and everything, how is the stimulus that the president signed yesterday going to help you and other club owners?
Well, there's something called shuttered venue. Okay, there's a couple different parts of this bill. There's a PPPs for the payroll to keep paying that, and there's also shuttered venue, which gives you an opportunity to get some money back that you lost. It's kind of a grant. It's not, most everybody. If you lost 90% of your business, you're eligible to get a shuttered venue. And which most of us did. I mean, and then they changed it to 45%, if you only lost, if you lost 60 or 70%, you might be able to recoup like 45% of what you lost.
Yeah.
The bill. And we're keeping our fingers crossed that indeed is the case. So we can pay everybody and also pay a lot of bills that we incurred, over the past year.
Yeah.
There was a lot, but it's going to save a lot of us. That's for sure.
One question before we get to two gentlemen want to jump in with us here, and they will in just a minute. Why comedy clubs? Why show business for you, Chris? I've always asked you that question, but why? Way back then.
I used to work in music. I mean, initially, when I was a kid, I was involved in bands, and actually sang a little bit back in the day. But, one thing I learned, I booked bands for a while. And, when the drummer gets drunk and winds up in jail, the show's not happening the next night. Okay. Yeah. So the good thing is I figured, well, if a comic can make it to the gig, we're on. So that's really, the way it morphed, into why I got into comedy.
I would imagine, and this is just me, very few comics, unless there was a death in the family, if they're booked by you, they're showing up.
Well, most of the time, now it's not so much. I don't book near as much, as I used to. One time, with we had about 12 punchlines and a lot of independent clubs that we booked. I think we were booking either 16 or 18 clubs at one time, early in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And they were all over the country, everywhere from Florida to Wisconsin to Oklahoma City. We're all over the place. So
that's got to be a contrast. A comedian from New York going to Oklahoma City, because I worked at Oklahoma with some of the casinos in there. Oh boy, what a difference! Yeah,
that was. Everybody learned, you know what I mean? It's been a learning process over years. It's learned, when we first did it, the guys from New York would come down south and make references that these people were looking at each other like, what's he talking about? That's just the way it was. And it took a while, you adjust like anything else. And, now with as many outlets as there is for comedy, everybody kind of has morphed, it's homogenized quite a bit from what it used to be.
The funny thing is, when you start out, like my Uncle Tubby, who you kind of knew, and Jay Leno and all the rest, they always said to me, Gary, if you play clean, you're going to play everywhere. If you're dirty, you're limiting yourself. And we're going to get into that because one of my guys, Mark Riccandano and Richie Burns, they both want to come on in, but Mark has got to scally ho about 4:30. So Mark, Richie, you want to join us? They are the hosts of Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. Chris DiPetta, this is Mark Riccandano on the bottom right. This is Richie Burns on the left. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. There
you go. Well, Gary, you just mentioned about working clean, and I guess what I'd ask Chris is, when you're booking a comic, obviously, if they're filling a room, you probably don't worry about it as much. But if it's an unknown, do you lean toward clean, or do you not discriminate on that at all?
I don't give a fuck. Okay. No. I mean, here's the thing. It really depends. I mean, pretty much now you can just do anything you want. It really doesn't matter, other than being politically correct, which I hate, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, with you guys.
Yes.
Because it's killed a lot of things that are very funny. I was doing this yesterday. I went over this with my son. I said, he's a comic as well and an actor, but he, we were talking about, how laughter is a reflex. You have no control of what makes you laugh. Okay. Yeah. But your conscience kicks in about a second after you laugh. Okay. So you may hear something that's very funny and then realize, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at that. Which is really that's crazy. It is absolutely crazy to get involved in something like that, but it's true.
Well, perfect example is when somebody falls. You immediately laugh and go, "Oh, are you okay?"
Yeah, exactly. You have no control of that, and that's good. That's what it's about. It's and that's why people who analyze comedy, okay, people that try to analyze comedy are insane, okay, because you can't analyze comedy because you don't know. Okay, there's nothing, nothing's printed out. There's no book that said, say this and people are going to laugh.
Yeah, people always want a blueprint.
I think Mark just made a good point without realizing it. When people fall, you go, oops, are you okay? And then when they are, you go, dude, that was hysterical.
Yeah, exactly.
Because nobody got hurt. I think that's the problem, is that with a lot of jokes, nobody's getting hurt, but then somebody comes in and goes, hey, that could be hurtful. It's like, but it wasn't. It wasn't hurtful. It wasn't meant that way. You've turned it into that now after the fact, and I think that's a problem with what's going on today.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the intent. Your intention is not to hurt anybody, but some people might take it that way, and that's the problem. It's perception, like everything else in this world.
Yeah, but let me jump in here for a second. As far as being dirty or clean when you work it really depends. Now. Starting off, nobody should work dirty all the time. I mean, that's a waste of time, because people they really don't want to hear filth on stage unless it's somebody famous who's famous for dealing filth. You know what I mean? It's like if Louis C.K.'s on stage, besides all the stuff that went on with him, they came there to see Louis C.K. and they know that this is not going to be a clean show. It's going to be dirty, And if you went to see Brian Regan, that show is going to be incredibly funny, and he won't swear at all. There won't be a word that will be offensive to anyone. So
before we go anywhere, I worked with Dennis at Eastern Airlines, Chris, when he was slinging bags back in the day, and I also remember Brian when he first got started at the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale. I remember him very well. Yeah.
But I'm losing you guys.
We're there.
Chris, you make an interesting point in that I always tell young comics, stop trying to be Louis C.K. when you don't even know who you are yet. And
because there is Louis C.K. Louis C.K. there. When Mitch Hedberg was alive, there were 50 guys who were doing Mitch Hedberg. Okay.
Yeah, I describe comics as this guy's Dave Attell if he wasn't a good writer.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just interesting the entire comedy business. But gentlemen, I wanted you to meet this guy because he is a force in the business and he's a good friend of mine. What other questions do you have?
Well, the reason
go
ahead, Richie.
No,
you got it.
You go.
Well, the reason I brought up the clean or dirty thing is within the last year and a half. I got a contract with Disney Cruise Lines, which you have to be squeaky clean.
Ooh.
But then I also was working on a tour called the No Apologies Tour, the edgiest comedy, that is on tour. And it was with Mitch Fatel, Aaron Berg, Tom Cotter. And people kind of said, well, you have to pick one or the other. And my belief is whoever's in front of you try to entertain.
Exactly. I mean, you're trying to, you're a comic. You want to make people laugh. That's all. And if you're on Disney Cruise, you got to be incredibly clean. It's to the point that it's almost ridiculous how clean you have to be. And I have one guy that I manage, Dale Jones, who might
Dale.
Yeah, Dale might be listening to this. He got tossed from a Disney Cruise. I mean, he just said after one time they said, "Oh no, we can't do this." And Dale is not dirty at all.
No, yeah.
However, he did a joke about a one-armed juggler that his name is Dale Jones, and they were fighting over their website, and the captain came up to him after his set was over and said, "Look, you can't make any jokes about one-armed people. We may have one-armed people on the ship." And he did a joke about someone with a voice box, his next door neighbor who had cancer, and she had to use a larynx box to talk. To tell him to go get cigarettes for her. And again, after the show, the captain came up and said, "Look, you can't make fun of people with larynx boxes because we may have somebody on the ship." Come on. All right. At the end of that, he said, "Okay, that's enough. I can't do it."
You know what I learned? You don't want either of those people in the lifeboat with you.
Exactly.
And who wants a one-armed person at a show where you need applause?
Exactly.
I once was on a cruise ship, and you guys know the whole front is the old people who get there really early, and they all have the oxygen machines and everything. During the show, I got an applause break, and I went, shh, shh. And I went, you'll wake them, meaning the people in the front. And I got in trouble for that. They don't acknowledge the fact that people might be sleeping in the front row. And I'm like, for all we know, they could be dead. Just finish the
Oh yeah, I was on the cruise ship, the Emerald Seas, way back, and I did some joke and some, because all we had on board for that, it was Easter week, was a born again Christian Baptist church, Chris, from Atlanta, Georgia.
Perfect.
And I don't think it was Dr. Stanley's church, but it was one of them. And I said something. I can't remember what the joke was. All I know is the woman came up to me later and she said, I find you completely despicable, what you just said. And some woman came up next to her and said, I found it rather funny. And she's my best friend. So, I mean, it's all depends what. And costume. Yeah, getting costume at Disney is bad because Goofy takes your wallet after
you up. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, here in Orlando, in Central Florida, if any DJ or anybody on the air does any impression of any Disney character, it's a $5,000 fine immediately if they find out.
Yeah, well
that's probably the biggest advertiser.
They run the show.
Yeah. But you know what? That doesn't stop me from doing Mickey. Oh boy. Anyway, Chris, what have been some of the interesting comedians that you've seen over the years that when you first saw them, you went, this person's not going anywhere. They came back 6 months later and you went, there's a change. And then the opposite of that, you open mic night, you thought, this guy's killing, they're going to do good, or the lady's killing. And then the next time you saw them, they just kind of went down in the toilet.
Well, the open mic night, I can just make up a name for you because you won't know the difference. Okay.
Yeah.
It disappeared anyway. But, some people that, geez, there's so many, you think about that. I mean, nobody started out, like David Cross started at our club in Atlanta. Okay. And David is not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, I think he's incredibly funny, but he's been like that since he started. Okay. And starting off, that's, it takes a while to develop that. And it took years for him to get to be, really famous and known and for people to understand his humor. But, to look at it, you're going, this isn't going to work. And it turns out, the guy made millions. So, he did okay for himself.
Yeah.
And there are other examples, but right now I can't remember any.
Is there a line for you as an owner, as a club, where you go, I think this person's really funny, but I know the audience isn't going to go with them. Have you ever said, I can't book this person even though I want to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, let's put it this way. Most of the guys that own clubs that have been around the business for a long time really have a difficult time booking guys we like and laugh at because our humor level is a little different than most people. We've skewed terribly. I mean, what makes us laugh is mainly sick stuff that most people would not like or not get. And, it's a constant ball bust fest, when we get together. So we have to be careful a lot of times. I don't book for me anymore. I mean, I book for what I hope the audience will like. Much of it is now, I mean, a lot of stuff is podcast guys that have come up and YouTube sensations that have, came out of nowhere that nobody knew about 6 months ago. But, all of a sudden they got
and they don't really have an act.
It's usually a one-time shot through. I mean, there are, of course, podcasts now that guys have, people like to listen to podcasts. I don't happen to be one of them, but, if you got that much time on your hands, I guess you can if you don't work anywhere or have to pay attention to anything else. Podcasts are probably the way to go.
Talk about Billy Gardell, how he walked in through the front door and how you got to be his manager.
Well, Billy's, we're going on, it'll be 30 years next year that we've been together. Okay.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. He, yeah, initially when we came together, I was booking him with Joe Sanfilippo because he started in Orlando, and Joe called me up and said, "Hey, can you give this guy some work?" And I said, "Sure, I'll throw him out there." And then when I finally got to see him, he said, "Can I, come see me?" At that time, I was kind of estranged from the Punchline. I kind of took off, opened another club, went to New York. And so Billy said, "Come watch me at the Punchline." And I said, "Okay." So I went and watched him. I saw him on stage, and I thought to myself, wow, this guy's a real powerhouse. I just saw it on stage. I hated his material. Didn't like anything he did. I mean, I just didn't care for anything because all it was drugs and alcohol. He didn't really go anywhere else with his humor.
Yeah.
But you could just see he was a presence on stage, and that's a lot of it, man. There are some people that, are just they're just forces on stage, and he happened to be one of them. And then I told him, check back with me in a year, and then we'll talk about management, which he did. And he checked out a couple other guys, and I'll do a quick story. He checked out. He was talking to Tom Sobel about managing him. And so he shows up to Tom Sobel's office about 45 minutes late. Oh. And Tom goes, "Hey, he didn't really say much." He said, "Oh, come on in, blah, 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 do this." Then he talked to Brad Greenberg in Charlotte about him managing him. And he did the same thing. He was 45 minutes late. He went in and, Brad said, "Oh, that's okay. Come on in, sit down. We'll talk about blah, blah, blah." And then, he was in Atlanta. He came to see me. He was 45 minutes late. I looked at him. I go,
well, he's consistent anyway. Yeah, he's consistent.
I said, "Get a fucking watch." That's what I told him. And he goes, "Okay, you're my guy." That's pretty much it. That's how it started.
We've unfortunately we've got to say goodbye to Mark because he's got to go. He's got a club date tonight somewhere. Either that or he's driving outside of Philly just to watch baseball. I'm not sure what he's doing. But anyway, Mark, is there anything you'd like to say to Chris before you go?
Yeah, it's great to meet you, and I've heard your name over the years, and it's so cool to put a face to the name. And
now you ever get down south, or you just always stay up in Philly?
No, I love the South. I love Atlanta. It's such a great city, and friends that live down that way, but I try to go everywhere. I'm a Midwest guy, and then
he's
I moved
from
to New York.
I'll tell you the story real quick. Chris, he's from Youngstown, Ohio, and on the day that he graduated from high school, a couple days later, he left for New York because he was, I think, the American Academy had him as a student, as an actor. But he told his mother, which was a lie, that if she bought him the Firebird, like was in Smokey and the Bandit, he would stay. He would stay in Youngstown, Ohio, which was a lie, and everybody knows it. But anyway, he went to New York. He's terrific. I hope if I'm going to try to get some stuff, Chris, in front of you for this gentleman because I love him like a brother, like you wouldn't believe. Now,
so nice.
Richie, on the other hand, is like family to me. He never calls me, never writes to me, never does anything for me. So I mean,
Cleveland, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, Cleveland.
Yeah, so I understand gray sky.
Yeah, I mean, Youngstown's where the redneck meets the Guido. It's a great place.
Yeah.
Everybody has a wife beater, but for different reasons.
Anyway, I know you got to get out of here and go do a club date. Thank you so much, Mark, for
thank you for having me on. I really was excited to meet you, Chris. And Richie, I'll talk to you later tonight.
Okay, Mark, have a good show.
Good night, guys.
Good night. You're listening to Mainstreet. Gary Allen with you. Chris DiPetta is my main guest, and my co-host for a little while anyway is Richie Burns, who also happens to be the warm-up act for Dr. Oz. Now that's kind of a tough gig, a warm-up act for a medical show. I mean, that's just.
Did we meet when Billy did the show? I was there. Yeah, we met in the hallway, didn't we? I thought we did.
I don't think we met. You know what? You were with Bill. I've known Billy for a long time, and that's right. We did meet quickly. I was running on the set, and Billy was like, "Hey, man," Billy was backstage. So yeah, we did. I even told the story. I met Billy in like 94, maybe 93, and it was his first time in New York, and I had to pick him up. We were driving to do a show in Teaneck, New Jersey, and at the gig when Billy was on, a fight broke out in the audience. I remember it was a really bad fight. Like they had they had to stop the show. I remember a guy yelled out, "I went to a fight and a comedy show broke out." But a few years, about 10 years ago, so Billy was on the Tonight Show or one of the shows, and I was with a friend of mine, and they said, "Oh, Billy Gardell's going to be on." I said to my friend, "The worst gig I ever did in my life, I did with Billy Gardell. It was in Teaneck, New Jersey." And when he went on the show, I phone in, whoever it was, said, "What's the worst gig you ever did?" And Billy said, "This place in Teaneck, New Jersey." It was just so funny. And I brought it up at Oz, and Billy goes, "Yeah, I remember that."
That's funny.
He was great on Oz. He was a lot of fun. He was with Dolvin Quince, he was getting into shape and all. Yeah.
Exactly.
What has changed about it since '82 for you, Chris, that you'd like to change back? I mean, if you could make some changes.
You know, it's everything changes. Everybody knows that, but you know, it's gotten to the point where, you know, it got a lot more corporate. You know, I mean, now it's like guys actually can make a living, you know, just working comedy clubs if they're, you know, they have a little bit of some kind of good promo, some TV or, you know, film or movies, and they're reasonably funny. You know, you can work, you know, across the country. There are A rooms, there are B rooms, there's C rooms, you know, but you know, a lot of the rooms lost their personalities when the owners disappeared. You know, the owners are gone. All the guys that, you know, you were there with, you were having drinks with after the show, or you were going out with, or hanging out with.
Right.
And we all got older, of course. You know, I couldn't keep that pace up anymore because in the early 80s, it was brutal. You know, it was a lot of fun, but boy, it was brutal.
I mean, you'd come off stage in LA, and Bud Friedman would be probably outside, maybe sitting at one of the tables, or he'd be in the main room, and he'd watch you and he'd critique you. He'd sit down with you. And that's what I really loved about the Improv. Not so much the comic strip. I didn't go up there, the Comedy Store, rather. I didn't go up there very much, a few times. But what I liked was that all the comics would come down there, and Glenn Hirsch, of course, and Rick Overton and the rest of them would all be hanging out there. And if they watched your act, they'd critique you. Even if you were the MC, they'd critique you, and they'd say, "Hey, try this with this, try this with that." And that's what I always loved about it, was the graciousness of all the comics that would come from New York and come down. It was always great stuff.
The camaraderie was always there, and they also needed something to do. I mean, you know, they had an extra 23 hours on their hands, so they had to do something. You know, and it's like, you know, we'd go out and we'd drink a lot, you know, at the time, do whatever drugs we were doing at the time, and, you know, and get breakfast or dinner or lunch or something. And then, you know, talk about, you know, the business and what was going on, you know, in different places. I mean, at one time I probably knew 60% of the comics in the country, you know, I mean, in the country. And now I have no idea how many I know.
You don't know 60% of people in a region. There's so many comics, you know.
Yeah. Do you think that's a problem, Richie? You think that's a problem?
How can I put this? I used to love going on the road and going to Detroit or going to Atlanta or going wherever. They don't need me anymore because they have enough comics in their backyard. The problem is that those comics only really talk about what's going on in that backyard. So, how are they? If you're not going to branch out, and it's harder to branch out because no one wants to pay you to come out when they have so many comics already, it's kind of do you agree with me, Chris? Kind of an interesting time in that comics seem to be staying closer to home.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are, because they can make a living staying close to home.
Right.
But you never do that before. There might have been one club within 200 miles.
Right.
So, you know, you were on the road. I mean, you had to have a good car. You know, something was a road car that was cheap on gas that you could get from one gig to another.
Yeah,
and, you know, it's not the same. I mean, even Los Angeles is, you know, a lot of people there have lost touch with the rest of America. I mean, that's part of, you know, the reason that they can be very funny there, or they just stay there now. They don't even leave anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, guys that are good can go and they work all over the country, but there's a lot of comics. There's so many comics in LA that never leave LA. Yeah. You know, they just work around town, do this, and I don't know what they do. I don't know what they do for money, to be perfectly honest.
Well, they can do like I did, voiceover work. You can do 5 and under work on shows sometimes. I mean, when shows get back in production.
Right, but even now that it's gotten so expensive to get there, that doesn't pay the bills anymore. You know, it really doesn't.
You know, I used to live in an apartment, Chris, right off of Melrose on North Kings Road. My wife and I paid $850, $900 a month for a 1-bedroom. A friend of mine went to the same apartment building a year ago. It's $3,200, $3,500 for the same apartment.
I was going to say it's at least that. You know, it's like it depends on where you are. The further out you go, you can save a little money, and you might be able to get a 1-bedroom for $2,400, you know, a month. I mean, and that's you know, even if you gig on TV, you make what, $700 for under 5 and or maybe even 800. By the time you pay the taxes there now, which are brutal. Taxes in California are nuts. Yeah,
they are
bad for people. You know, it's tough.
I mean, I just saw something the other day. My brother sent it to me. My brother lives up in Boston. A studio apartment in Boston, $4,000 a month. A studio. How do the people survive? I mean, when I go to Miami, I'm going to be paying $1,250 for a 1-bedroom. That's at least somewhat reasonable. Yeah. Chris, what do you look for if you're seeing a comic on stage or back in the day? You know, whether it's a woman or a man, what do you look for to say, yeah, let's book that person? And do you have to see them numerous times over a period of a year or two?
Not really. It depends on how much time I watch or how much I've seen them, and also what I've heard about them. You know, now it's a lot of it is mouth either from other comics or other club owners to tell us about, you know, acts that are coming up or people that I'm wired in basically. And I mean, and we all talk. I mean, all the club owners talk all the time, and also, you know, the agents and different managers give me a call and give me a heads up on talent that's coming in that has never been, you know, in the States before. I mean, I'll give you an example. We had there's a guy named Sugar Sammy, okay, from Montreal. Okay, he's an Indian comic. Okay, I had never heard of him. This is like 14 years ago. I never heard of him. He never played the United States at all, ever. Okay. And his manager called me up and said, I'd really like you to book this guy. And I said, well, you know, I don't know who he is. And she said, well, you know, trust me, he'll do well. And I said, all right, well, I'll book him Easter weekend. Okay. Now you have to remember, Easter weekend is probably the worst weekend ever in comedy. It's I've tried Jews at Easter. I've tried Christians at Easter. Okay. So I figured, what the hell? I'll try an Arab for Easter and see how that works out. They're not Arab, I'm Sikh. I'm sorry. It's I'm getting it mixed up now.
It's okay, Chris. It's okay. I don't take offense to it.
Exactly. Well, it turns out Sugar Sammy comes to town on Easter. And I've lost money at least $8,000 to $10,000 every year for 25 years. Okay. And I'm not lying. It's been that long that we've lost money on Easter.
Right.
He comes to town. I swear to you that if you would have walked in the club, you thought you were in an Indian restaurant. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, there were more Patels there than, you know, the phone book in wherever. And wherever. I'm serious. It was crazy. It was a great business. We actually made money. And I thought to myself, well, this is different for me. I said, I'm okay. I was educated at that time.
He only performs there once a year at Easter time for you.
Pretty much, I tried that all the time. Now he's so big. He stayed in Montreal for 2 years and did a concert every night in Montreal and in French, because he speaks French, of course, fluent. And he wouldn't leave Montreal anymore because he was making so much money. He just stayed there the whole time. And so it took a while. I mean, he's traveling now, and also he's one of the judges on America's French, whatever the French version of America's Got Talent is.
Polly Chaser from Europe asks us, what does an average comic make in an evening, Chris? And I guess it would depend on if it's New York, Boston, LA, whatever. Is he a headliner? Is he whatever?
Close. Okay, that's not it. It doesn't. It's. Are you talking an average comic or just a? All
right, give it the high and the low.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's hard to say that.
No, I'll give you a high and a low. It's like I'll give you. Here's the low is $10 and the high is $150,000. Okay, so that's really pretty much it's anywhere in that ballpark.
In between, I fall in between that, Chris.
I'm sure. as most people do. Usually on the low end of that too.
Yeah.
They fall in between 10 and 150,000.
Yeah, I used to tell the club owner in Fort Lauderdale, kiddingly, I used to say to people, folks, do you realize what I'm getting paid tonight to entertain you? I'm still going to own the cab, owe the cab driver money when I get done from what I'm getting paid tonight. Which reminds me, that place was a great place. That's where I met Carol Leifer. That's where I met Rich Scheidner, who is a friend to this very day. And for some reason, I forget this guy's name. He was the funniest gentleman I ever met in my life. Dennis Wolfberg. Dennis Wolfberg was the funniest gentleman. Great. I loved him. Yeah. We would sit at the bar and talk Boston Celtics basketball.
No, Dennis was a sweetheart. I loved the guy. I mean, really and truly, he's gone so early.
Yeah.
When he was at a club, he crushed. I mean, he really did. And one line that he had that I loved, he used to be a teacher.
Yes.
Okay? And he couldn't say anything really bad about, a kid or if they were stupid or whatnot. And he said, well, he saw the parents and knew that they really weren't so, that bright either. So he said, well, your son is cerebrally vacuous. Okay. And I was what a great line. And they go, okay, that was good, and it just,
he would roll his eyes. Those eyes that he had were so animated. His entire facial expressions when he get on there. People who weren't even scheduled the night that he was performing would show up and just sit in the back to watch him work. He was such a joy. When he was in LA, when he was out there, I remember it was he and I and Glenn Hirsch, because Glenn just got through doing the Tonight Show that night with his bottle of champagne that he had. And who was it else? I can't remember who. I might have been Robin Williams was over at another table, and Robin was even laughing at his stuff. I mean, he was so funny.
Right. Glebe Hush. I remember that. It was it's Glenn Hirsch. Glebe Hush.
Glebe Hush. His greatest thing was he'd go into a restaurant in the South and he'd go, you got any water? And the waitress would go, what? You got any water? She'd go, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, you got a hose? Give me some hose juice. I'm going to have Glenn on the program. I want to get him and Rich Scheidner on at the same time.
Gary, when you do, ask him about the night we had a bomb threat at the Punchline.
I will.
Seriously.
I will.
It's a great story.
Well, you tell it. What happened the night we had a bomb at the Punchline?
We got time for it. But anyway,
yes.
My partners went to a fight. There was a big fight that night. I forget who was fighting. Foreman or something was fighting, and I got the club by myself. All right. Now we threw a guy out of the middle show. The early show. We threw a guy out of the early show, and he was pissed. Well, apparently he went to the phone booth, and because there were no cell phones at the day, he calls the club, calls the front desk at the club, and he calls in a bomb. He says, "There's a bomb in the club. It's going to go off in an hour." Okay. Now. Yeah. Okay, it's an hour, and I'm thinking to myself, I got 3 sold out shows. Okay, now we're about half hour, 45 minutes into our first show. Glenn's just about to go on. I'm thinking to myself, if I put Glenn on now, if he does 40 minutes, I probably don't have to return any money to anybody. So I said, all right, here's what we do. And so we're going to call the cops in 20 minutes and tell them there's a bomb. It'll take about 10 minutes for them to get here. I said, I'll go and tell Glenn.
I could see Glenn on stage worrying about a bomb.
Well, and the green room was right next to the stage. So I'm going, psst. I'm in the green room on hey, Glenn. I said, and he's like doing his show, and he's like, why are you bothering me? I go, come here a second. I go, okay. And I pulled Glenn over. I said, hey, Glenn, not for anything. I said, take your time. I said, but somebody phoned in a bomb threat. So go ahead. And I said, do about 20 to 30 more minutes. I said, and then we're going to, we'll have to clean the place out and see if there's a bomb anywhere. And then we got another show you got to remember that's going to happen outside. I got people starting to line up wrapped around the building. Okay. So Glenn very slowly goes back into the stage. I swore he must have did 10 more minutes. And he goes, okay, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up. And if you would please exit really quickly out the door. Didn't say anything about anything. Says, wrap it up. And I'm yelling at Glenn, why the fuck did you take so, I said it in half an hour. He says, there's a bomb. I go, there's no bomb.
And you know what? I can see the expression on his face, that look that he gives you when he's like, what? I can just see that look. Oh, let me tell you.
Listen to this. This is the funny thing. It's like, you have to remember, I had another sold out show. So what we did is everybody left the building and the cops came in with sniffing dogs to go through the building to just check and see if there's a thing. All this took place in about 35 minutes. All right. So everybody's still waiting outside. And I said, the guy goes, there's no bomb. It was probably bullshit. I go, great. Okay. Well, get ready for the third show. And so we just opened up the door and I ran everybody in, sold out the third show.
Oh God, that's funny.
Nobody teaches that in management school. Let me tell you.
No,
and that's what you learn. The guys who are Friday managers cannot handle the comedy club like that. Okay?
Most clubs just give the comic a light.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's so funny. I know you have a consulting business for other comedy clubs. When a club calls you in, what are they calling you in because things aren't going 100% well, or they just want to make some changes and get your advice?
Well, first, I haven't done it for a while, okay? Only because it's just I got other things going on. So at one time I would go in and I'd say, look, you pay me this amount of money and I'll save you this amount of money. Okay, this is how this works, because I can avoid everything you're going to do wrong. And so many people, you think it's simple, okay? You think it's like, hey, there's all you need is lights and some sound and a stage, and you do this, and you think that that's the easiest thing there is to do. And it's amazing how many people did it wrong over the years. It's like, what are you thinking about? What's wrong with you? And I just laugh. I could save somebody $100,000 by spending a week with them. I've done
it's all marketing. I mean, it's all marketing. I mean, how you market the business, who you bring into the club, and how the audience is going to take to that club, and consistency, I guess, would be part of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true, but you also, I mean, it's a tough business in the way you have to look at it, because it's not like another business. Generally, if you have food there as well, okay, you're running three businesses. Okay, you're running a bar, you're running a restaurant, and you're running a comedy club, and they're all three very different. And you can piss off somebody three different ways, probably 4 or 5. But it depends on what wasn't right at that moment.
Yeah,
okay? And that's what people are going to remember about the club. Now, we were always able to. Our kitchen was always slow at Punchline when we first started. It took forever. I mean, it was just. We had it was a 10 by 10 kitchen trying to feed 260 people. It was tough. It really was. And that was our biggest complaint. It was always about, the food was here late, we do that. But the shows were so good that we were able to get through it. You know what I mean? We put everybody on the stage. I mean, there's not an act you could probably name that hasn't played the Punchline stage at one time or another in comedy over the past, we're going on, it'll be 40 years in February next year.
Wow.
When I was emceeing at the Improv in LA, I would bring Robin up and he just finished an hour up at the comedy store, and he'd come into our room, and I'd look at Bud and I'd go, at first, when I first start emceeing, I'd say, Bud, you know what's going to happen? He's going to be on that stage for an hour and a half, and everybody who's lined up to go after him, forget it. You might as well go home. But Bud would say, put him up. And I'd put him up, or Billy Crystal, or some of the other guys. And then once Robin got to know me a little bit and knew I was with the Groundlings down the road, he would try to do some improv with me. Well, unfortunately, I'd stand there for an hour and a half just watching him work. I wasn't doing any improv with Robin Williams. I was just watching Robin. And then he'd give me this look like, okay, Gary, it's time for you to go. And I'd leave the stage. But he would kill. What did you do at the Punchline when you had somebody like a Robin Williams or Billy Crystal, or when Billy would come in, or Jerry Seinfeld or Carol? They were the mainliners, so there was nobody after them anyway, right?
No, not at all. I mean, Robin, he was at the club a couple times, but only as a guest, not as not as a paid performer, and he'd come in and, he'd go on stage. I mean, it was, you had to, you know what I mean? It's just like Robin sees a stage. It doesn't matter where he worked before. He's going on that stage. That's usually how it was. And he was a sweetheart. I mean, it was great to be around. I mean, it really was. And just always had a good time.
Well, Chris, I told you that story, that if it wasn't for him, I would have never been with the Groundlings anyway.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for him, I would have never been with the Groundlings.
Right.
I mean, I was there taking classes, but they bumped me up because of him.
Right.
Are most people going to comedy clubs regular, or mostly new people every time? I think a lot of regulars go, right?
There's a group of regulars, but there's also, because of new acts that we bring in that have different followings, especially podcast people and the YouTube kids. They bring a whole crowd in. Problem is, they only bring them in once. They don't come back. It really, they don't. It's amazing. They'll bring people in. They'll pack the place. They'll have a good time, and they'll never come back for another act.
I'm going to tell you something. We got some great comics on this stage, and one of them is right at the bottom of this screen. Richie Byrne. If you ever get a chance, I'd like to hear that he's. I'd like to hear that he's at the Punchline. And Chris, I push my people. I push my friends.
I know you do,
Chris. I have a question though. I heard you say earlier before, when I was backstage, that you got involved in this because you were in music.
Yeah.
So this is about how long back, 40 something years ago that you?
Yeah. I mean, I booked bands for a while. I mean, before we opened the Punchline, we were still in nightclubs and booking bands and doing concerts in different places. And it got a little bigger, but it got to be more expensive too. I mean, everything progressed to the point where I don't know if we want to risk this much money, because back in that day, the promotion business was not a lock. Hey, we're going to sell out. It's like you had to pay the act, and if you didn't make it, they had to come out of pocket or somewhere in order to pay the act. So, I ventured into comedy. I saw it initially. We saw it in Cleveland. I mean, really and truly. Dave and Ron, my partners at the time, we used to go back home to Cleveland at Christmas time. Okay. And every time we went, we'd go to the Cleveland Comedy Club. And the Cleveland Comedy Club was in the worst area in Cleveland. It was downtown. It was a little shotgun room, and it was packed every night. And so, after a couple of years, we said, you know what, this would probably do really well in Atlanta. And so it took us about 6 months to find a place in Atlanta to open up. And once we did, we were sold out for 2 years in a row, every show, every night, which never happened. No one's, it doesn't happen very often. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did you get into management? Is it just
management? Yeah, I'll tell you how it really happened. First of all, most comics don't know anything about anything, okay? And going back, because I was in the music business a little bit, and I understood, how a contract might work and how someone could get booked or things like that, I figured, well, I knew a little bit more than most of these guys did about that. And also, at the time, Gary Shandling was a regular at the club. He'd come in about every 8 months. And I watched Gary. He was at the club when he got the call that he was going to host the Tonight Show. Okay. Wow. And we were like, oh shit. And I thought to myself, his manager at the time was Brad Gray. Brad Gray's from Buffalo. I said, I'm from Cleveland. I could certainly do this. Okay. I mean, come on, let's be realistic. Okay. If he can do it, I can do it. And, I met all those guys years back, the guys that became legends in the business, truly guys who are monsters in the business now.
You mean comics or?
No, not the managers, the management part of it, but comic wise, it was one of those things. I mean, like Foxworthy was really the first guy really managed. Okay. And that was something that, Jeff got so good so fast, because from the time he first stepped on stage to 5 years later, he was on the Tonight Show.
Wow.
But you have to remember that Jeff worked from Tuesday to Sunday for 48 weeks a year, maybe 50, for 4 or 5 years in a row. Okay. And you get good, if you, and you write, and you don't have too many vices, you can probably become a pretty good comic,
Yeah.
especially if you have a talent for it. And he
Right.
did.
Which he did. Right.
Yeah.
So he got the 10,000 hours in quickly.
Yeah, he did. Big time. But you can't do that anymore.
No.
Comics can't, first of all, finding stage time is hard enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Certainly you're not doing 20 minutes or half an hour every night,
Yeah.
every day of the week.
I mean, even
it did.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't hear you.
Another one that did is Steve Harvey. He bought a club in Dallas. Was Man and Steve. And for 2 years, he was on stage every day. He did at least 20 minutes, half hour every day, every night. And also he was seeing comics come through there. He had the best of every urban comic go through there. So he was able to hone his act from everybody going through.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that probably helped him a lot was recurring audience members. Because if you're a house MC or whatever, and you get up and you see the same people that have seen you before,
right?
It tends to make you want to write new material. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, and it's like you really have to work on that.
Yeah,
that's the one thing that everybody talks about who have been on cruise ships. That once they do a ship, and then they go to another ship during the same week, and then they come back a couple of weeks later or a month later and do the same ships again, they notice that the cruise directors are stealing their stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All the time.
Yeah, they did it to me when I was on the Emerald Seas, even though Tubby was on there too. But Tubby would tell them, "Hey, that's Gary's stuff. Don't be stealing that stuff." But they'd still have me back. Chris, we got a few minutes left here. When this is all said and done with the pandemic, do you think we're going to go back to, and I use this phrase, the Roaring 20s? People getting out to clubs, whether it's a comedy club or a nightclub or whatever. Are we going to go crazy Meshuggah, or are we going to,
here's the thing. I think that people of a certain age are going out. They're going to go crazy. Okay. I really do. I think that, everybody's been cooped up, 21 to 40, I think are going full out, pedal to the metal. And they're going to go out and do everything they couldn't do in the past year. And and here's the thing, they probably have money to do it as well, because people that worked during this time had nothing to do. They couldn't go out to eat. You're not buying concert tickets. You're not flying anywhere. You're not going on a boat. You're not taking a cruise or traveling. You couldn't go anywhere if you wanted to. So, that money either went into remodeling your house, or if you had one, or, in a savings account in the stock market. So I think people are going to blow it out. I think people a little older, 60, 55, 60, right, will be somewhat cautious. But, if you're vaccinated, which I am, fortunately,
I'm getting my second shot in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll. I want to go out. I mean, I want to do things and get on a plane. I haven't traveled in 8 months. I've been in LA in a year, and that never happens because I'm there every 2 or 3 weeks at least.
Well, by the end of July, I'm going to be in Miami. You're welcome to come on down and be on one of my live shows.
Well, I might do that. Definitely.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you're always welcome.
I got to put a quick plug in for my kid. He's at Side Splitters in Tampa. So if anybody's around, go see him.
Really?
Yeah, he's with Mike Cannon.
What's his name? What's his name, Chris?
Don DiPetta.
Oh, Don DiPetta.
Believe it or not, Don was in one movie. He's been in 6 movies, but small parts. The last one was Green Book, which won an Academy Award, and we Sebastian. We're in the movie together. I told him, well, you got one thing nobody else has other than Sebastian. You were in one movie that won an Academy Award. No one can take that away from you.
Was he one of the neighborhood guys in it?
He was sitting around the table. He was one of the guys sitting at the table.
Okay. Oh, wow.
He was Vigo's brother-in-law.
Is he in New York? Where's he out of?
No, he's in LA. He lives in LA, but we're trying to get him to New York because people want to. He'd love to be able to open up. Speaking of New York, I talked to Chris Mazzilli today, and he said Gotham is opening up April 8th.
Great.
Yeah,
What I noticed? Talking about what Gary was just talking about. I've done a few shows now because New Jersey opened up at 25% capacity. Here in New York, you can't yet. They still won't allow comedy, but I did a few shows in New Jersey, and to small audiences, literally, 40 people, 30 people. But what I noticed is those people were so supportive.
Oh yeah.
The crowds, I think for a while anyway, in entertainment, especially in comedy, there's going to be that connection of comic and audience where the audience, like, we're just so happy to have it back.
Exactly.
Here in New York, sometimes you get that attitude of make me laugh.
Right, exactly.
Not going to get it for a while. People are going to
blow up. Gary, I think it'll blow up. I think it'll be big for a long time. I think really Roaring 20 big. That's how big I think it'll be.
Hey, Chris, I'll tell you a quick story. Gary, I'm sorry. Before we go. A few years ago, Billy was playing the Paramount Theater here in Long Island.
Right.
And a friend of mine who's a comic called me and said, hey, my mom's a huge Billy Gardell fan. Can you do me a favor? Can you get in touch with somebody, see if she could just go back and meet him and just go meet him and say hi? I'm taking her to the show. All I want to do is bring my mom and have my mom feel like Billy Gardell. And I go, all right, let me see what I can do. And like every comic, I forgot all about it. And the day before the show, my buddy called me and he goes, hey man, what's going on with Billy Gardell? And I go, oh shit. So I reach out to Ben Creed.
Yeah.
And I go, Benny, I totally forgot about this. Is there any way you could reach out to Billy? Maybe he could say hi to my friend's mom. And Ben writes back, goes, I'm on the show, fucker. Ben got them backstage, and he and Billy treated this woman like she was royalty. Yeah. And I will always be indebted to Billy. And Billy, like any friend of Richie Byrne, is a friend of mine, and blah, blah. And that meant the world to me. Billy's just such a class guy.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart. He really is.
Yeah. I would like to get Billy on here, but I know he's way too busy to come on what we're doing here. That's for sure. I know that. But Chris, I want to thank you so much. The hour has gone by, and Richie Byrne, thank you so much, my dear friend. Chris, stay on after we go off the air. We'll talk for just a couple minutes, but I want to thank all of you out there for joining us every Friday at 4 p.m. Mainstreet. I'm Gary Allen, your host. Next week, we have Bruce Phalange on, and Bruce is going to talk about the recreation or the however you want to put it. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. About Hollywood Squares. And another friend of mine is going to be on that, Will Schreiner, who I can't, one of the things I can't wait to get these cataracts removed. Then I can get my tickets back flying, and Will and I are going to go flying all over the place because Will loves to fly as much as I do.
Perfect.
So,
Gary, I like your shows more than mine.
Huh?
I like your shows more than mine.
Thank you. That's very complimentary of you. Trouble is, he never calls me to tell me that. He never writes. He never does anything. But folks, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on Mainstreet. Please join us every Friday at 4 p.m. Don't forget about all the great shows that are on: Jokes, Drinks, and Storytelling. We have some great hosts. Well, I always get it all screwed up right here on twitch.tv. Chris DiPetta, thank you so much. Thank you all out there. We'll be back next week at 4 p.m. with May.